I was 78 years old when I learned I was still capable of crying. For 12 years, living at Sunrise Nursing Home in Portland, Oregon, I had convinced myself that my tears had dried up, along with any hope that someone would remember my name. The white walls of that place had become my only real company, along with the heavy silence that filled the hallways and the smell of disinfectant that never left my nostrils. My name is Anthony Sullivan, but around here, everyone called me just Mr. Sullivan from room 304, as if I were more a piece of furniture in the establishment than a person with history, with memories, with a past that was once full of life and purpose. I had been a civil engineer for 45 years, built bridges that still connect cities in rural Oregon, designed buildings that house families to this day, but none of that mattered anymore when my own children decided I was just a burden they didn't have time or patience to carry. It was on a Thursday afternoon, one of those when the sun comes through the dining room window and illuminates the empty tables where some of us still try to find reasons to keep chewing the tasteless food, that I heard that voice for the first time. It was high-pitched, full of energy, completely out of place in that environment where even conversations seemed like whispers from people who had already given up being heard. "Mommy, why is that man sitting alone? Doesn't he have any friends?" The question came from a small boy, couldn't have been more than 5 years old, with messy brown hair and curious eyes that shone in a way I had forgotten existed. He was pulling the hand of a young woman, must have been about 30, wearing the light blue uniform of the nursing home nurses. "Michael, don't point, honey. The gentleman can hear you." His mother tried to pull him away, but the boy resisted with that innocent stubbornness that only children have, that pure determination that hasn't yet been broken by life's disappointments. I pretended I wasn't listening, as I always did when someone talked about me as if I were deaf or invisible, and continued stirring the mashed potatoes that for days had tasted like nothing. "But why is he alone, Mom? Everyone needs friends," the boy insisted, and there was a genuine concern in his voice that hit me like a punch in the stomach. It had been so long since someone cared about me that I had forgotten what that felt like. "Michael, some people prefer to be alone," his mother said, but the answer didn't convince even herself. The boy let go of her hand, and before she could stop him, he was walking toward me with determined steps, like someone who had an important mission. My first instinct was to shrink back, pretend I didn't see, protect myself from that approach, because after years being ignored by my own family, any attention seemed like a trap ready to disappoint me again. "Hi, my name is Michael," he said, stopping next to my chair, extending his little hand dirty with soil, as if he had just come from some adventure in the garden. "Do you want to be my friend?" I looked at that extended hand as if it were an alien object, something that didn't make sense in my world of loneliness and abandonment. My throat was so tight that I couldn't answer immediately, just kept looking at those brown eyes that stared at me with such pure expectation that it hurt. "Michael, don't bother the gentleman." His mother approached quickly, clearly embarrassed, but there was something in her eyes too, a sadness I recognized because it was similar to mine. "I'm sorry, Mr. Sullivan. My son is very curious. He doesn't understand that sometimes people want to be left in peace." She tried to pull the boy, but he didn't move. "But Mommy, the gentleman looks sad. Grandma always said that when someone is sad, we have to give them a hug." The mention of his grandmother made something move inside me, an old memory of when my own grandchildren were this small, before their parents decided that my visits were too inconvenient, that my presence disrupted their lives, too organized and busy to include an old man who was no longer good for anything. "It's okay," I finally managed to say, the voice coming out hoarse after so long without really talking to anyone. "I can be your friend, Michael." I don't know where those words came from. Maybe from somewhere inside me that I thought had died along with my dignity when my children left me in that place and stopped answering my calls. The smile that lit up Michael's face was so intense that I felt as if the sun had risen just for me for the first time in years. He pulled a chair with difficulty, dragging it across the floor with a noise that made some of the nurses look in our direction with curiosity, and sat next to me as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "My name is Anthony," I said, and it was strange to say my own name out loud after so long, being just a room number or a patient who needed medicine at 9 in the morning. "But you can call me whatever you want." I don't know why I said that. Maybe because deep down I was afraid that if he called me by my name, it would become too real, and real things could hurt me again. Michael thought for a moment, swinging his little legs that didn't reach the floor, and then his face lit up with an idea. "Can I call you Grandpa? My grandma Carol went to heaven last year and I miss her so much. Mummy cries sometimes when she thinks I'm not looking." The question caught me completely off guard. I had 3 grandchildren of my own who never called me Grandpa, who barely knew my name, who probably didn't even remember what I looked like. I felt a lump in my throat that had nothing to do with the nursing home's bad food and everything to do with that little boy, offering me something I had lost so long ago that it hurt just to think about it. "You can," I said, and it was at that moment that I felt the first tear roll down my face, followed by another and another, until I was crying there in the middle of the dining room, in front of that 5-year-old boy who looked at me with a mixture of surprise and concern. "Grandpa, why are you crying? Did I say something wrong?" Michael asked, his little voice full of guilt he shouldn't feel. Julia, his mother, came closer, and I could see tears shining in her eyes too. "No, honey, I think you said exactly the right thing." She looked at me with an understanding that only those who have been through the pain of abandonment can have. And then she did something no one had done in years. She placed her hand on my shoulder with a gentle touch that reminded me I was still human, still worthy of a gesture of affection. From that day on, my life at Sunrise Nursing Home changed completely. Michael started coming to visit me every day after school, running through the hallways with a backpack full of drawings he had made for me, dinosaur stories he wanted to tell me, questions about what the world was like when I was a child. Julia worked the afternoon shift as a nurse, and instead of leaving Michael with some neighbor or at relatives' houses, she started bringing him to the nursing home, and the boy always came straight to my room, knocking on the door with that contagious enthusiasm before entering and shouting, "Grandpa, today I learned about the planets in school, and you won't believe that Jupiter has a storm that lasts 300 years. I, who had barely talked to anyone in the last few years, suddenly found myself telling stories about the bridges I built, the places I knew when I was still young and full of dreams. The trips I took with my late wife Helen before she left 15 years ago and left me alone in a world that seemed to have forgotten I existed. The other residents of the nursing home began to notice the change. Mrs. Margaret from room 308 commented at breakfast that I was different, more alive, and she was right, because for the first time in a decade I had a reason to comb my hair in the morning, to wear the less wrinkled shirt, to smile when I heard little footsteps running in the hallway, because I knew they were from someone coming to see me. "Mr. Sullivan, are you dating?" Mrs. Margaret joked, and I laughed, a real laugh that surprised even myself. "No, but I got myself a grandson," I replied, and the joy in those words was so palpable that she smiled too, that sad smile of someone who understands what it's like to be forgotten by your own relatives. Michael introduced me to his world in a way I never imagined would be possible at 78 years old. He taught me about Pokemon and superheroes I had never heard of, showed me how to draw astronauts and rockets, told me about friends from school and teachers who were sometimes annoying, but deep down were cool. "Grandpa, did you know that Julie from my class said, 'I'm lucky to have a grandfather who lives in such a big place'? I told her you don't live here because you want to, but that it's okay because now I come visit you every day and we have so much fun." His innocence in transforming that nursing home into an adventure, in seeing beyond the white walls and the smell of medicine, in making me feel that I wasn't a forgotten burden, but someone important in his life, was something I couldn't put into words. One afternoon, while we were in the nursing home garden where Michael insisted on taking me to get some sun, because according to him, Grandpa, the teacher, said that sun is good for bones, and I want you to stay strong, he asked me something that caught me completely off guard. Grandpa, do you have other grandchildren? The simple question carried enormous weight. I stayed silent for a moment, watching the tree leaves moving in the wind, trying to find the right words. I do, Michael. I have 3 grandchildren who live in New York with my children. He became thoughtful, swinging on the swing that was rarely used because most residents no longer had energy for these things. Do they come visit you? The innocence of the question hurt more than any accusation could hurt. No, my dear, they don't come, I finally said, deciding that Michael deserved the truth, or at least a version of it that a 5-year-old child could understand. Sometimes families get too busy with their own lives and forget about the people they used to love. I expected him to be confused or to change the subject like children usually do when something is too complicated. But instead, he stopped swinging and looked at me with a seriousness that didn't match his age. That's very sad, Grandpa. But now you have me, and I'll never forget about you, because you're my heart, Grandpa, and Mommy said that family isn't just blood, it's love too. His words hit me with a force that almost knocked me off that garden bench. I pulled Michael into a tight hug, feeling his small, warm body against my chest, and I cried again. But this time they weren't tears of sadness, but of gratitude so deep it didn't fit inside me. Julia approached at that moment, had finished her shift and was coming to get Michael to take him home. She saw the scene, and her eyes filled with tears too. "Mr. Sullivan, can I talk to you for a moment?" she asked, and there was something in her voice that worried me. Michael ran to play a bit more on the swings while she sat next to me on the bench. "I want to thank you for everything you've done for Michael. Since my mother passed away, he became very withdrawn, stopped smiling, had nightmares every night. The psychologist said it was grief, that it was normal, but nothing I did seemed to help. But since he met you, he went back to being that happy boy. Talks about you all the time at home, makes drawings to bring, counts the days to come with me to work just so he can come here." She paused, wiping a tear that ran down her face. "You gave my son back to me, Mr. Sullivan, and I'll never be able to thank you enough for that." "Julia, if anyone needs to say thank you here, it's me," I said, my voice choked. I was just waiting to die in this place, without any purpose, without any reason to wake up in the morning. Michael gave me back something I thought I had lost forever, the feeling that I still matter to someone, that my existence makes a difference. We sat there in comfortable silence for a few minutes, just watching Michael play with that infinite energy that only children have. "Mr. Sullivan, can I ask a personal question?" she asked, hesitantly. "You can, my dear," I replied, comfortable enough with her now to call her that. "Why don't your children come visit you? Michael asked me that at home, and I didn't know what to answer." The question I had avoided answering completely, even to myself, had finally been asked out loud. "It's a long and painful story, Julia, but I'll try to summarize." I took a deep breath, preparing to open wounds that had healed badly. After my wife Helen passed away 15 years ago, I dove into work to not feel the pain of loss. I worked 15 hours a day, buried myself in increasingly complex projects, and in the process, I distanced myself from my children. When I finally retired at 67 and wanted to reconnect with them, I discovered they had built their lives without me. Robert, my oldest son, is a lawyer in New York, married to a woman who always thought I was a nuisance. Christine, my middle daughter, lives in Boston and barely speaks to me since I refused to help her financially at a time when I myself was having problems. And Marcus, the youngest, simply followed the example of his older siblings. I paused, feeling the weight of each word. When I started having health problems, frequent falls, memory lapses, they got together and decided it would be best to put me in a nursing home because they didn't have time to take care of me. They didn't give me a choice, didn't ask what I wanted, just showed up one Saturday morning, packed my bag, and brought me here. In the first few months, they still came occasionally, but the visits became rarer until they stopped completely. It's been 5 years since I've seen any of them. Julia was silent, processing my story, and I could see anger and sadness fighting on her face. "That's terrible, Mr. Sullivan. How can children do that to their own father?" she asked. But it wasn't really a question expecting an answer. It was more an expression of indignation. "I ask myself the same thing every day, my dear. I wonder where I went wrong, at what point I stopped being important enough to deserve at least a phone call on my birthday or at Christmas. But the truth is that some people just move on with their lives and leave behind those who no longer fit into the narrative they've built for themselves." At that moment, Michael came running back, breathless from so much playing. "Grandpa, Mommy, did you know there's a yellow butterfly over there in the flower bed? She's beautiful. Come see." And just like that, as only children can do, he transformed that heavy moment into something light and full of magic again. In the following weeks, my routine at the nursing home changed completely. Besides Michael's daily visits, Julia started including me in small things in their lives. She would call to ask my opinion about recipes she was trying to make, about how to deal with Michael when he got stubborn, about mundane daily decisions that meant the world to me because someone was treating me like someone whose opinion mattered. On Grandparents' Day, Michael showed up at the nursing home with a gift wrapped in colorful paper full of drawings he had made himself. "Grandpa, this is for you," he said, pushing the package into my hands with so much enthusiasm he almost knocked me off the chair. Inside was a frame with a photo that Julia had taken of the two of us in the garden, Michael sitting on my lap, both smiling as if there was no sadness in the world. Below the photo, in Michael's childish and crooked handwriting, was written, "My heart, Grandpa, I love you so much, Michael." I cried so much that day that the nurses got worried, thinking something was wrong, but they were tears of such pure happiness that I didn't even know I was still capable of feeling. I put the frame on the nightstand next to my bed, replacing the old dusty photo of my children and grandchildren who never came to see me. And every morning when I woke up, the first thing I saw was that smile from Michael, reminding me that I still had value, that I was still loved, that I still had a purpose in this world. The months went by and Michael grew visibly, getting taller, smarter, but never losing that sweetness that made him special from day one. He started teaching me things from school. Basic math I had already forgotten, English words he was learning, stories about America that I already knew but pretended not to, just to see him all excited explaining to me. "Grandpa, did you know that America was discovered in 1492? The teacher told us today, and I thought it was really cool because it was a long time ago, but not as long as you," he said one afternoon, and I laughed at the way he could make me feel old and young at the same time. It was on a rainy October afternoon that everything changed again. I was in my room reading a book that Michael had lent me about space adventures when I heard agitated voices in the hallway. I recognized Julia's voice, but there were other voices too, deeper, unfamiliar. My heart started beating faster without me knowing exactly why, just a bad feeling that settled in my chest. My room door opened, and Julia entered with a pale face, Michael hidden behind her, holding tightly to the hem of her mother's blouse. "Mr. Sullivan, there are some people here who want to talk to you," she said, and her voice was strange, tense, in a way that scared me. Behind her came 3 adults that took me a few seconds to recognize because they had aged as much as I had. But when I recognized them, I felt my blood freeze. Robert, Christine, and Marcus, my 3 children, were standing at my room door for the first time in 5 years. "Dad," Robert said, and the word sounded strange coming out of his mouth after so long. "We need to talk." They entered without asking permission and closed the door, leaving Julia and Michael outside, although I could hear Michael asking softly, "Mummy, who are those people? Why did Grandpa turn so pale?" I couldn't find words. Just kept looking at those faces that I once knew so well, but now seemed like strangers. What do you want? I finally managed to ask, my voice coming out weaker than I would have liked. Christine took a step forward, and there was something in her eyes that I couldn't tell if it was guilt or anger or a mixture of both. Dad, we heard through acquaintances who work here that you've been getting very close to a nurse and her son. We came because we're worried they might be taking advantage of you. Her words hit me like a slap in the face. Taking advantage, I repeated, feeling anger begin to boil inside me, an anger I had kept for 5 years of abandonment. You disappear from my life for half a decade. Don't answer my calls. Don't come see me at Christmas, on my birthday, at any time, and now you show up here worried that someone might be taking advantage of me. Marcus tried to intervene. Dad, we were busy. Life in New York is hectic, you know how it is. I got up from the chair with difficulty, leaning on the cane that Michael had decorated with colorful stickers for me. No, Marcus, I don't know how it is. Because when I was busy building a career, building a life, I still made time to be present in your lives, to go to your football games, your school parties, your graduations. But apparently I didn't deserve the same treatment. Robert sighed, that tired sigh of someone who thinks they're dealing with a stubborn child. Dad, we didn't come here to fight. We came because we discovered you've been talking about changing your will, about leaving part of the inheritance to this nurse and her son, and we need you to understand that this is a mistake. And there was the truth finally revealed. They hadn't come out of concern for me. They had come because of money, because of the house I still had in my name in Portland, the savings I had kept during years of work. So that's it, I said, feeling a sadness so deep it almost made me sit down again. You don't care about me. You care about my inheritance. 5 years without showing up here, but it was enough to hear that I might share something with people who really care about me for you to run here. Christine turned red. Dad, it's not like that. We care. We're just too busy and... Too busy for a 5-minute phone call? Too busy for a card on Father's Day? Too busy to care if I was alive or dead? I interrupted, my voice rising in tone for the first time in years. Get out. Get out of my room now. They stood there, clearly not expecting this reaction. Dad, you need to be reasonable. Robert started, but I raised my hand to silence him. I told you to leave. You had 5 years to show you cared about me. That girl and that boy out there gave me more love and affection in a few months than you in a whole lifetime. So don't come here pretending you care about me when you really only care about my money. The door opened and Julia entered, clearly having heard part of the discussion. Excuse me, but you need to leave. You're upsetting Mr. Sullivan, and that's not good for his health. Robert looked at her with contempt. You have no right to throw us out. We're his family. Julia stood firm in front of them. Family is who's present, not who shows up after years wanting something, and now please leave before I call security. My children finally left, but not before Robert said, Dad, you're going to regret this. We're going to contest any changes you make to your will. When the door closed behind them, my legs gave out, and I fell back into the chair, my heart beating so fast I thought I was going to have an attack. Michael came running in and jumped on my lap, hugging my neck tight. Grandpa, don't be sad. Those bad people left and now you're with us again. Julia knelt beside me, holding my hand. Mr. Sullivan, I swear I never asked you for anything or implied I expected something. If your children think that, they're completely wrong. I squeezed her hand with the strength I still had. I know, my dear. I know you never wanted anything from me except affection and company, and that's exactly what you gave me when I needed it most. You saved my life, gave me a reason to keep living when I was just waiting to die. I spent the following days thinking a lot about what had happened, about the choices I had made in life, about the kind of legacy I wanted to leave. I scheduled a meeting with my lawyer, Dr. William Anderson, who had been my friend for decades and who was shocked to learn that my children had abandoned me for so long. Anthony, are you sure about this? he asked when I explained what I wanted to do with my will. Your children are going to contest this in court. It's going to be an ugly battle. I smiled for the first time in days. William, I'm 78 years old, and I don't know how much time I have left. I want to make sure that the little I built in life goes to people who really care about me, not to those who only show up when there's something to gain. I changed my will, leaving most of my inheritance to a foundation that would be created in the name of my late wife Helen, dedicated to supporting nursing homes and improving the quality of life for abandoned elderly people. A smaller portion was destined for Julia and Michael, not because I expected anything in return, but because I wanted to ensure that boy who gave me back the will to live had opportunities to study, to grow, to realize his dreams. In the months that followed, my children tried several times to get in touch, always through lawyers, always with threats and demands, but I stood firm in my decision. Michael continued being my reason to wake up every morning, visiting me religiously, bringing his stories from school, his increasingly elaborate drawings, his contagious joy that transformed that nursing home into a less gloomy place. Grandpa, today I talked about you at school when the teacher asked about our family. He said one afternoon, perched on my bed while I was lying down recovering from a bad flu. What did you say, my dear? I asked, running my hand through his hair. I said I have the best grandfather in the world, that you built huge bridges when you were young, that you're very smart and teach me lots of cool things, and that even though you live here in this place, you're very happy because I come visit every day. His eyes shone with that pure honesty of a child. The teacher said, I'm lucky to have you. On my 79th birthday, Julia organized a small party in the nursing home dining room. She invited some of the other residents who had become my friends after Michael brought life back to me and made me want to socialize again. There was chocolate cake that Michael insisted on helping to make, colorful decorations he hung around the room with his mother's help, and balloons that made the place seem less like a warehouse for forgotten old people and more like a space where moments of joy could still happen. Make a wish, Grandpa, Michael shouted when the candles were lit. I closed my eyes and didn't need to think much. I wished that Michael and Julia would always be happy, that love would never be lacking in their lives, and that I could be present as much as possible to see that boy grow up and become the incredible man I knew he would be. When I opened my eyes and blew out the candles, everyone applauded, but it was Michael's tight hug that made me shed tears again. Those good tears that I had learned to shed freely after so many years holding them back. I love you, Grandpa, he whispered in my ear. I love you too, my heart grandson, I replied, and at that moment I understood that family wasn't about DNA or last names or blood obligations. Family was about choice, about presence, about love given freely without expecting anything in return. Michael had chosen to call me Grandpa that afternoon in the dining room months ago, and that simple choice by a 5-year-old boy had given me back something I thought I had lost forever. The certainty that my life had meaning, that I mattered to someone, that there was still love and kindness in the world, even in the most unlikely places. Today, whenever I look at that photo in the frame decorated with Michael's childish handwriting, whenever I hear his little footsteps running down the hallway coming to visit me, whenever I feel his tight hug or hear his crystalline laughter echoing through the white walls of the nursing home, I know that the day a child decided that a forgotten old man deserved to be called Grandpa was the day I was reborn. And if someday I leave this world, I'll leave knowing I was truly loved, not out of obligation but by choice, and that I left a mark on the heart of at least one person who will remember me with affection and longing. Because in the end, it's not the money we leave or the constructions we made that define who we were, but rather the hearts we touched and the lives we transformed by the simple act of being present, of caring, of loving. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for following Anthony and little Michael's story all the way to the end. If this story touched you in any way, if it made you reflect on the important people in your life, or if it reminded you of someone special, I really want to know. Leave a comment below telling me which moment moved you the most, if you've lived through a similar situation, or if you know someone who needs to hear that they're still important and loved. Your stories matter to me and to our entire community here on the channel. Also tell me if you have any theme you'd like me to address in upcoming videos, because this space is ours. It belongs to all of us who believe in the power of stories to transform and connect people. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, click that little red button down below and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any new stories. And if you can, share this video with someone you love, because sometimes people need to be reminded that it's never too late to reconnect, to show affection, to make a difference in someone's life. A huge hug from someone who believes that everyone deserves to be called grandpa, mom, dad, friend, simply by choice and love. Until the next story, and remember, you matter, your presence makes a difference, and there's always time to write new chapters of love and connection in your life.